But thankfully, it's working again. All right, so let's go ahead and copy down example 1. All you're going to do is write your conjugate. Because remember, they always come in pairs. So you have 4 different imaginary complex roots. And you're going to write the conjugate of each root. So whenever you're finding the conjugate, you're really just changing the sign in the middle. And in your homework, the first couple questions, you're just identifying the conjugate. So here, if I know I have a 0 at 3 plus 2i, that means I also have one at 3 minus 2i. If they tell me that I have a 0 at negative 4 plus I, that means I also have one at negative 4. Wait, if they say it's at negative 4 minus I, that means I also have one at negative 4 plus I. So there's an invisible 0 here, but we just don't put it when it's 0. 0 minus 2i, but if there's one at 0 minus 2i or at negative 2i, there's also one at positive 2i. And then lastly, if there's one at negative 3 plus 5i, there's also going to be one at negative 3 minus 5i. All right, any questions about identifying the conjugate? Notice that the only sign I changed was the sign in the middle of my terms. That's the only one that you change. All right, so now we're going to practice writing equations. So go ahead, we're going to create a polynomial. It's going to be a 3rd degree. And I'm telling you, we have a 0 at negative 5, and that one has a multiplicity of 1. We also have one solution, which is negative 2i. Okay, so here's the tricky thing. This is a trick question. I don't know if anybody's going to know this. But does anyone know what factor is going to give me negative 2i as a solution? First of all, we know we have 2 solutions. That's really a negative 2i and we have a positive 2i, because remember, they go together. But does anyone know the factor that will give me plus and minus 2i? We had one of those yesterday in our notes. All right, so how do I get to a square root of a negative? What does my factor have to be for me to get to the square root of a negative 4? X squared equals negative 4. Okay, let's bring it over. We're getting closer. X squared plus 4. The factor that's going to give me negative 2i is x squared plus 4. So I'm going to just remind you of that because that's the first thing you have to recognize is what is the factor. In order to get an imaginary, we have to take the square root of a negative, which means our factor is x squared plus some number. Instead of x squared minus a number, it's x squared plus a number. So just a review, and you don't have to write this down, but it is important that you are able to quickly identify what your factors are. So this is how you would get that plus and minus 2i. So if I have a 0 at negative 2i, that means I have a factor. So I have f of x equals, and then my first factor is x squared plus 4. But then it also tells me that I have a 0 at negative 5. So what factor gives me a 0 at negative 5? X plus 5, good. And it's telling me that that factor has a multiplicity of 1. So I don't need to square it. So now to write our polynomial, we need to multiply these together. And that's going to give us the function that is a third degree function with a 0 at negative 2i, positive 2i, and negative 5. So I'm going to go ahead and make a box because I do like making boxes for multiplying. Go ahead and fill in all 4 squares. I'm going to pause. I want you all to actually multiply it out. Because in class, I do want you all to try to do some things on your own and then compare it. Because I do recognize that there's a lot happening in pre-cal. I guess that's why it's the weed out class for a lot of colleges. But we have to, you have to practice in order to make sure you're, understanding the material. So fill in all 4 squares, and then I'm gonna fill in all 4 squares, and then we'll see if we agree. So do I have any like terms in my boxes? No. So my answer would be f of x equals, and I just start with the highest power and go down. X cubed plus 5x squared plus 4x plus 20. That is my third degree function. That is going to give me a 0 at negative 5 with a multiplicity of 1, and also negative 2i. All right, let's do another one. Go ahead and copy down example 3. Now we have a 4th degree. We have a 0 at positive 3. This time that has a multiplicity of 2. And we also have one at positive 5i. So the first thing we need to do is identify our 2 factors. So we have 2 factors here. So I have f of x equals. So So I have a 0 at positive 3. So that means my factor is what? X minus 3, except this time it's squared. Okay, so we have a 5i, which means that my factor is going to start with x squared plus. X squared plus what? 25. Yep. So my second factor would be x squared plus 25. Because in order to get a positive and negative 5i, that means I had to take the square root of negative 25. All right, so we have a multiplicity of 2, which means you really have x minus 3 twice. So go ahead, make your box. Multiply, we got to do 2 boxes for this one. You're going to multiply x minus 3 times x minus 3. So I would probably start off by multiplying these two. You don't have to, but I think that might be the easiest. So feel free to make your box. Multiply x minus 3 times x minus 3. Okay, so this is what you should have. Who had that when they multiplied the x minus 3 times x minus 3? So you should get x squared minus 6x plus 9. So now we're going to make one more box. And the second time we make our box, it's a little longer. So we're going to take the x squared minus 6x plus 9, multiply it by x squared plus 25. So I'll give you a couple minutes to fill in all 6 squares. All right, so I know in my first row I should have x to the 4th. This is minus 6x cubed. That's plus 9x squared. And then in my bottom row, I have 25x squared. 100. Is that negative 300? No. Negative 150. Negative 150x. And then 25 times 9 is 225. Okay. All right, so we do have 2 like terms. This time they're not at a diagonal because we have the same degree. So there's only 2 boxes that can be added together. So my final function would be f of x equals, and then we have x to the 4th minus 6x cubed. And then what's 25 plus 9? 34, good, x squared minus 150x, it's a long one, and plus 225. Any questions? So the only difference in 4, 7 is that we just have a lot more imaginary. Yes, Aaliyah? Okay, so we have to figure out, in order to get a 5i, the only way to get 5i is if I'm taking the square root of 25, negative 25. If you take the square root of negative 25, so if we have x squared plus 25, if it's, that's the only way, because 5 times 5 is 25. So maybe the main thing you just need to remember is that you're squaring the imaginary number, and then it just has to be x squared plus. Because if it was x squared minus 25, well, that gives me 2 real answers, and I'm trying to get 2 imaginary answers. So we have to take the square root of a negative in order to do that. All right, so now let's move on to example 4. So we have to find the remaining zeros. This is where long division is going to come into play. So this is my function, and I'm telling you one of my answer is 3i. So it's a 4th degree. I know I'm looking for 4 answers. They gave me 3i, which means they really gave me 2 answers. So I already know 2 of my answers. So what 2 answers do I know? 3i and negative 3i. So we already have 2 of them. Now, unfortunately, we cannot do synthetic division with imaginary. We have to do long division. So what would be the factor that would give me these 2 solutions? What factor gives me a positive 3i and a negative 3i? X squared minus 9 plus 9, yep. So that means that I'm going to take the x squared plus 9, because that's the factor I know. And I'm dividing that into that long thing, yeah. I know, right? So when you do long division, it's really important that you're neat. Like, you want to make sure you're lining up. You're like, and if we think we're like a messy writer, we kind of want to straighten it up for long division, because we need everything to be in columns. So in order to do long division, we always start off by dividing the first term. So this example would be x to the 4th and x squared. So because what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to figure out what quadratic I need to factor or use a quadratic formula for to get my last 2 solutions. So I want you to take x to the 4th and divide that by x squared. And what do you think you get when you take x to the 4th divided by x squared? I'm going to have to move this over because it's in my way. All right, you get what? X squared. I'm going to put that on the roof. I'm going to line it up with my like terms, though. I'm going to put it above the 7x squared. You always start by dividing your first term. And then you're going to take whatever answer you get and multiply it by your divisor. Divisor is what's in front, that x squared plus 9. So I want you to take that x squared and multiply it by x squared plus 9. See what you get. And you should get x to the fourth plus 9x squared. And I don't know if you remember when you learn how to do long division in second, third grade, you would have to subtract it and then you would bring down the next number. That's what we're going to do. But we need to line up our like terms. I'm going to put this x to the fourth here. I'm going to put the 9x squared here because it needs to go under its like term. We need to subtract, which means I'm changing both of the signs. So they will both become negative. So I'm going to draw my line. And I'm going to bring down the next group. We're going to have to do this 3 times. So this is going to cancel. So I'm bringing down my x cubed. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. And then I'm just going to bring down my last 2 terms. And then I'm going to repeat. So now what's my first term? It's no longer x to the fourth. What's my first term? X to the third. We're going to divide that by x squared. That's just going to give me an x. Put that on the roof. See, I'm building my quadratic. Then you take that x, you multiply it by x squared plus 9. So that gives me x to the third plus 9x. When I slide it over, I have to do a change. So I'm going to write, it's going to become a minus and a minus. Notice that more and more things are dropping off. Now 2 things dropped off. And the only thing I have left is negative 2x squared minus 18. So one last time, and we'll have our quadratic and we can factor it. Now what's my first term? Negative 2x squared. So let's take that negative 2x squared and divide that by x squared. Look, now we got our quadratic. I could really stop here, but I'm going to finish it just because, just like with synthetic division, we need to end with 0. If you're not ending with 0, then you need to go back and figure out what you did wrong. Because it's a factor, which means your remainder should be 0. So when you factor that, you get negative 2. Negative 2 times x squared plus 9 would be negative 2x squared minus 9. Sorry, not minus 9. Minus 18. Because 2 times 9 is 18. When I bring it over, though, see they're both negative. They're going to both become positive. And you see how now they both cancel out. And that's what should happen anytime you're doing long division. The first time you do it, 1 thing should drop off. And then the second time, 2 things should drop off. So to find my last 2 solutions, I need you to factor what's on the top. Take the x squared plus x minus 2 and factor that down. You don't need to make a box. We just need to find your 2 numbers. They have to multiply to be negative 2 and add to be positive 1. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to give you a negative 2, but add to give you a positive 1. Do we all agree with justice? 2 and negative 1. Who got positive 2 and negative 1? All right, so now we're going to set those equal to 0.
I got negative 2.
So we need a positive in the middle. Wait, are you talking about your solutions?
Yeah.
No, we're doing the factors. You're one step ahead of us. All right, so then this is that. All right, so now when I solve it, my four solutions would be x equals -2, x equals +1, x equals +3i, and x equals -3i. So I'm going to have you copy down the next one. And we'll just get as far as we can get. But notice how it's important to be neat, though, so you can see like what's happening. All right, last one. We'll see if we can finish it. If not, we'll pick up here tomorrow. So that's my function. And they told me 4i is one of my solutions. So in order to get a positive 4i, which means I also have a negative 4i, what is the factor that I need to divide into it? X squared plus 16. Good, let's do it. So we're just trying to build our quadratic on the roof. Start off by dividing your first terms, which would be 2x to the 4th and x squared. So let's do that. That's going to give you 2x squared. Put that on the roof. And now I want you to take that 2x squared, multiply it by x squared plus 16. So 2x squared times x squared plus 16. You want to make sure that's right. So we got x squared times x squared. That would be x to the 4th. And then 2x squared times 16 is 32x squared. So I'm going to bring it over. Line it up with its like term, though. You always flip the sign before you add. So this cancels out. So now I have 7x cubed. That's going to be a minus 4x squared plus 112x minus 6. Okay, let's go back to the top. What's my new first term? Take 7x cubed and divide that by x squared. 7x is on the roof. $64. Thank you. When I got down to the end, it would have been a problem. All right. So then I'm going to take 7x times x squared plus 16. So that would be 7x squared, 7x cubed. And what's 7 times 16?
112.
Yep, hopefully it's 112, but make sure. Is it 112? Okay, good, because if it wasn't, we'd be in trouble. because we need that 112 to drop off. So I'm going to line it up with its friend. Then I have to change both signs. Two things drop off now. And I end up with negative 4x squared minus 64. So what's my new first term? Negative 4x squared. Do it one last time, and then you have finished your quadratic. We won't have time to factor it today. We can factor it tomorrow to get our last two, but we have our negative 4x squared divided by x squared. Well, that's my negative 4. Now, I always just want to make sure, even though I know that it should be good, this is kind of how you can double check that you did the process right. Because at the end, everything should go away. So we have negative 4x squared minus 64. When I bring it over, though, see, they're both negative. They're both going to become positive. So now we have our quadratic, and we'll factor that tomorrow. We'll end there.